Boy saves mom from shark attack. A jaw-dropping story with an unbelievable twist. This is a story that will leave you speechless. A young boy's heroic actions to save his mother from a deadly shark attack seem like the climax of the tale, but what happens halfway through changes the entire ending. You won't see it coming. Before diving into the story, we'd love to know where you're watching this video from. Let us know your city in the comments below. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and hit the notification bell so you'll always be in the loop with all our latest content. The coastal town of Santa Esperanza was a hidden gem, a place where the ocean stretched endlessly and the warm breeze carried the salty scent of the sea. Summers in Santa Esperanza were peaceful, filled with the laughter of children running along the shore and the gentle sound of waves lapping against the sandy beaches. For Luis, a 13-year-old with a love for the ocean, this was his paradise. Luis had always been drawn to the sea. From the moment he could walk, he had spent most of his time near the water, his fascination growing with every passing year. While other kids his age were content playing video games or hanging out at the local pier, Luis was more interested in diving into the depths of the ocean. He wasn't just an average boy who liked to swim. He had an insatiable curiosity for marine life. Every day was a new adventure, a chance to learn something about the creatures that lived below the surface. His mother, Anna, was his greatest influence. As a marine biology professor, she had instilled in Luis a deep respect for the ocean and all its inhabitants. Her passion for marine conservation and exploration inspired Luis to follow in her footsteps, and together they would often explore the coast in search of rare marine species, unusual coral formations, or anything new that piqued their interest. Anna and Luis had a bond that was rare. More than just mother and son, they were partners in discovery. Every weekend, they packed their diving gear, small fishing nets, and spears, heading out to explore the lesser-known coves and inlets along the coast. For Anna, it was a chance to teach Luis about the delicate balance of ocean ecosystems. For Luis, it was an opportunity to practice his spearfishing skills and apply the knowledge he had gained from his mother. On this particular summer day, the sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the calm sea. Luis and Anna decided to visit a secluded cove, one Anna had mentioned a few times but hadn't taken him to before. The cove was known for its deeper waters and rich marine biodiversity, a perfect spot for Anna to continue her research and for Luis to test his skills in the open ocean. As they made their way to the cove, Luis couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. The ocean was always unpredictable, and he loved the thrill of never knowing exactly what they might encounter. Once they arrived, they set up their gear on the shore. The water was still, almost eerily calm, with only the occasional ripple breaking the surface. Anna was the first to dive in, her movements fluid and graceful as she disappeared beneath the surface. Luis followed, his senses immediately heightened by the cool touch of the water. They swam deeper, exploring the underwater world with the ease of seasoned divers. The water was crystal clear, revealing schools of brightly colored fish darting around coral formations and rocky outcrops. But as they swam farther into the cove, Luis noticed something unusual. The fish seemed more skittish than usual, darting away as if they sensed danger. He paused, his instincts alerting him to something lurking beneath them. He glanced down and saw it, a massive shadow moving silently along the ocean floor. Before Luis could react, the water erupted into chaos. A great white shark, larger than any Luis had ever seen, emerged from the depths with terrifying speed. Its jaws opened wide, teeth glistening in the sunlight that filtered through the water. Luis' heart raced as he saw the shark make a beeline toward his mother. Time slowed down. Luis' body froze as he watched in horror, his mind struggling to process the scene unfolding in front of him. The shark collided with Anna, knocking her to the side, and a cloud of crimson spread through the water as her leg was caught in the beast's powerful jaws. The attack was swift and merciless, the kind of nightmare Luis had only seen in documentaries. Anna's body went limp, and the ocean, once serene and peaceful, now felt like a hostile and alien world. Luis, however, couldn't afford to panic. His mother needed him. The calm, patient woman who had taught him everything he knew about the ocean was now helpless, her life hanging by a thread. and it was up to him to save her. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to swim away, to flee from the monstrous predator now circling them. But Luis didn't run. He tightened his grip on the makeshift harpoon he always carried with him. A simple weapon, one that seemed utterly useless against the massive shark. But it was all he had. He swam toward his mother, determined to protect her. The shark, sensing Luis' approach, turned its attention to him. Its cold, black eyes locked onto Luis, and for a moment, he thought this might be the end. But Luis wasn't just any ordinary kid. His years of experience in the water, his knowledge of marine biology, and his calm under pressure all kicked in at that critical moment. He remembered something Anna had taught him. Sharks were predators, but they could be outsmarted. If he could hit the right spots, he could disorient the shark long enough to save his mother. The great white circled again, preparing for another strike. Luis swam around the predator, using his agility and speed to his advantage. He aimed his harpoon at the shark's gills, knowing that a well-placed strike could confuse the beast. With all his strength, he thrust the harpoon forward, striking the shark's side. The predator thrashed violently, temporarily stunned by the blow. It wasn't enough to kill the shark, but it bought Luis precious time. He grabbed Anna, her body limp and bleeding, and swam as fast as he could toward a nearby rocky outcropping where they could take refuge. The shark circled back, its movements slower now, confused and disoriented by the injury. Luis pulled his mother onto the rocks, gasping for breath as he fought the exhaustion creeping into his muscles. He looked down at Anna. She was alive, but barely conscious, her leg bleeding profusely. He wasn't out of danger yet. The shark was still out there, and if it recovered, it would attack again. Luis knew he needed to do more than just hide. He had to stop the shark. The sun bore down on Luis as he clung to the rocky outcrop, his heart pounding in his chest. Anna's limp body lay beside him, her breathing shallow and her leg bleeding heavily. Luis knew they didn't have much time. He had to act quickly if he wanted to save his mother and himself. The shark, though temporarily disoriented by his harpoon strike, was still a deadly presence beneath the water, circling slowly as if regaining its strength for another attack. Luis wiped the salt water from his eyes, his mind racing. He had grown up hearing stories about shark attacks from his mother, who had spent her life studying marine life. But those stories always felt distant, like something that happened to other people in faraway places. Now it was real. The predator wasn't just a theoretical subject in a biology lesson. It was here, inches away from claiming his mother's life. Anna moaned softly, her eyes fluttering open for a brief moment before closing again. Luis felt a wave of panic wash over him, but he quickly suppressed it. His mother had always told him to remain calm under pressure, and that advice now felt more critical than ever. Luis surveyed their surroundings, searching for something, anything, that could help him buy more time. The rocky outcrop they were on was small and jagged, offering little shelter. The ocean around them was vast and unforgiving, with no boats or signs of help in sight. But Luis was resourceful, and he knew the sea better than most adults. He couldn't outmatch the shark in strength, but perhaps he could outsmart it. The first priority was stopping Anna's bleeding. Luis quickly ripped a piece of fabric from his wetsuit and wrapped it tightly around her wounded leg, applying as much pressure as he could to slow the flow of blood. His hands trembled as he worked, the reality of the situation pressing down on him like a weight. The shark could smell blood from miles away. The more Anna bled, the more the predator would be drawn to them. He had to keep it away, somehow. Once the makeshift tourniquet was in place, Luis turned his attention back to the water. The shark's dark silhouette loomed below, circling lazily, its massive tail cutting through the water with frightening ease. Luis knew that the great white was an apex predator, perfectly adapted to its environment. Any mistake on his part could be fatal. He needed a plan. His mind flashed back to all the things Anna had taught him about sharks. They were highly sensitive to movement in the water and had extraordinary senses, including the ability to detect electric fields generated by the muscles of other creatures. They weren't mindless killers. They were intelligent hunters. If he could exploit that, maybe he could turn the odds in his favor. Luis looked down at the gear they had brought with them. Most of it was basic: snorkeling equipment, small nets, a spear gun. The spear gun had only one shot left, and Luis knew it wouldn't be enough to kill the shark, but it could buy him time. He spotted a length of rope and a couple of buoys they had used earlier in the day to mark their dive spot. An idea began to form in his mind, a risky plan that could either save them or doom them both. He quickly tied the rope to the buoys, fashioning a makeshift flotation device. If he could lure the shark into attacking it, the predator might get tangled in the rope long enough for Luis to drag Ana to safety. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. With trembling hands, Luis prepared the trap. He threw the buoys into the water, making sure they splashed noisily to get the shark's attention. The predator paused its slow circling, its massive head tilting slightly toward the sound. For a moment, Luis held his breath, praying that the beast would take the bait. The shark moved. It was slow at first, cautiously approaching the buoys, as if trying to assess whether they were worth its time. Luis could feel the tension building in his chest, the seconds stretching out into what felt like hours. He clenched his fists, willing the predator to strike. Suddenly, the shark lunged, its powerful body slicing through the water with terrifying speed. It clamped down on the buoys, thrashing wildly as it became entangled in the ropes. Luis seized the moment. He grabbed Ana and, using every ounce of strength he had left, began to pull her toward the shore. The shark fought fiercely, its massive tail slapping the water in violent arcs, creating waves that threatened to knock them off the rocks. But the more it struggled, the tighter the ropes became, binding its movements. Luis kept dragging Ana, his muscles burning from the effort, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. Every step felt like a battle, his body screaming in protest, but he couldn't afford to stop. Just as he reached the shallows, the shark tore free of the ropes. Luis' heart stopped as he saw the great white thrash one last time, then turned toward them. It was wounded, angry, and determined. There was no more time. Luis grabbed the spear gun, his hands slick with sweat and seawater. He aimed it at the shark, knowing this was his last chance. The great white surged toward him, its jaws wide open, ready to strike. Luis held his breath and pulled the trigger. The spear shot through the water, striking the shark in the side. It wasn't a fatal wound, but it was enough to disorient the predator. The shark veered off course, thrashing in pain before diving back into the depths of the ocean. For a moment, everything was still. Luis collapsed beside Ana, gasping for air, his body trembling with exhaustion. The shark was gone, at least for now, and they were alive. But Ana was still unconscious, her leg bleeding profusely. Luis knew they weren't out of danger yet. Looking up at the horizon, Luis saw no sign of help. The shoreline felt impossibly far away, and he was alone with his injured mother in the middle of the ocean. He had bought them time, but now he had to figure out how to get Ana to safety before the shark returned. Or worse, before she succumbed to her injuries. The ocean's roar was deafening as Luis tightened his grip on the ropes and buoy. He looked back at Ana, lying unconscious on the rocky outcrop, her breaths shallow. His mother needed immediate help, but the shark was still a threat, a ticking bomb in the water, waiting for its chance to break free. With a deep breath, Luis swam back toward the thrashing shark, the buoy trailing behind him. He knew he had little time before the beast broke through the tangled netting. His heart raced, but his mind remained sharp, focused. He had spent years learning about marine life, and now that knowledge was about to save them both. Diving beneath the shark's belly, he looped the ropes around its body, his movements swift and precise. The shark fought back, thrashing and snapping its massive jaws, but Luis was quicker. He tightened the ropes, anchoring them to the buoy. The more the shark struggled, the more it became ensnared. For a brief moment, Luis felt a surge of hope. The plan was working. The shark was tiring, its movements slowing as the ropes dug deeper into its flesh. He had done it. He had trapped the predator. But just as he was about to swim back to shore, a massive wave crashed over him, slamming him against the rocks. The impact knocked the air from his lungs, and for a moment, everything went black. When Luis regained consciousness, he was lying on the rocky outcrop next to Ana, the taste of salt water in his mouth. His vision blurred, and he could barely move. But when he glanced out at the ocean, he saw the shark, still entangled in the ropes, struggling weakly. It was over. He had won. Hours passed before Luis heard the distant sound of a helicopter approaching. It was the Coast Guard, alerted by the locals who had seen the commotion from afar. As the helicopter hovered above, rescuers descended to the water, pulling Luis and Ana to safety. Luis was barely conscious, his body numb from exhaustion and cold, but relief washed over him as he saw his mother being lifted into the air. Once aboard the helicopter, Luis collapsed, the weight of what had happened finally hitting him. He had saved his mother from a shark, captured the beast, and survived an ordeal that would have terrified most adults. But as the adrenaline faded, he was left with a lingering sense of unease. By the time Luis and Ana arrived at the hospital, the story had already spread across Santa Esperanza. News reporters gathered outside the hospital, clamoring for interviews, eager to speak to the boy hero who had captured a shark to save his mother. Luis, overwhelmed by the attention, tried to focus on Ana, who was still recovering from her injuries. Inside the hospital, a doctor approached Luis with a grave expression. Ana's injuries were serious, but it wasn't just the physical wounds that concerned them. "There's something else," the doctor said, his voice low. "Your mother was bitten by the shark. We need to run more tests to ensure there's no long-term damage from the infection." Luis nodded, feeling a cold pit form in his stomach. As the hours passed, Luis sat by Ana's bedside, watching her sleep. Her breathing was steady, but the doctor's words haunted him. As the days went on, the media attention only grew. Luis became the center of a national story, and while some people celebrated him as a hero, others questioned his actions. How could a 13-year-old capture a shark? Some speculated. Conspiracy theories began to spread, claims that Luis had orchestrated the entire incident for attention. Luis tried to ignore the rumors, but the pressure was building. Meanwhile, Ana's condition worsened. Despite the doctor's best efforts, her infection wasn't responding to treatment. Luis, desperate to help, spent hours researching, trying to find a solution. But every lead turned into a dead end. One evening, as Luis sat in the hospital lobby, a stranger approached him. The man, tall and dressed in a suit, introduced himself as Mr. Sullivan, a marine biologist. "I've heard about your story, Luis," he said, his voice calm, "and I think I can help your mother." As the weeks passed after the shark attack, Luis tried to resume some sense of normalcy, but his mind was anything but settled. He had saved his mother's life, but something about the incident gnawed at him. The memory of the shark's sudden, violent attack was imprinted in his mind, but even more disturbing was the sense that this event wasn't random. For some reason, Luis couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper, something unseen, was behind it all. Ana had been recovering well physically, but emotionally, she was struggling. Though she remained stoic, Luis could see the fear in her eyes every time she looked at the ocean. Her passion for the sea and her work as a marine biologist had been the cornerstone of her life. But now, she hesitated even to go near the water. Luis could sense her internal battle, a struggle to overcome her fear while maintaining the identity she had built around her love for marine life. One afternoon, as Luis was helping Ana organize her research notes in the study, a stack of old journals caught his eye. They were Ana's personal notebooks, filled with years of observations and findings about marine ecosystems. These journals were not just scientific records. They also contained her thoughts and reflections on her work, her theories, and occasionally, her worries. Luis hadn't seen her refer to them in years, but something about them felt significant now. Ana had once confided in Luis about a series of unusual shark sightings she had been studying before the attack. According to her notes, sharks had been acting erratically in the waters around Santa Esperanza, appearing in areas they typically avoided and behaving aggressively. At the time, Ana hadn't made much of it, assuming it was a natural shift in migratory patterns or food sources. But now, Luis wondered if these irregularities had something to do with what had happened to her. As Luis flipped through the worn pages, something caught his attention: detailed observations from a specific period a few months before the attack. Ana had recorded several instances where fishermen had reported seeing strange, large predators unusually close to shore. There were even mentions of other incidents where local divers had been startled by sudden and aggressive shark movements. None of this had seemed connected at first, but now, Luis wasn't so sure. "What are you looking at?" Anna's voice broke his concentration. Luis looked up to see his mother leaning against the doorframe, her face pale and worn. "These notes? You were tracking strange shark behavior for months before the attack. Why didn't you tell me more about this?" Anna hesitated, her fingers gripping the doorframe tighter. "I didn't think it was important. At the time, I believed it was just a natural variation. Ecosystems change, Luis. Sharks migrate, food supplies shift, and they adapt. I didn't want to alarm anyone." Luis frowned. "But you recorded multiple unusual encounters. What if the attack wasn't a coincidence? What if something is happening in these waters?" Anna sighed and sat down, her eyes clouded with concern. "I've thought about that a lot since the attack. There's always the possibility that human activity is disturbing the sharks, pollution, overfishing, climate change. But there's another theory I've been too afraid to consider. Something deeper." Luis leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Anna hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low, cautious voice. "There's an old legend among the local fishermen about a creature they call a Sombra du Mar, the shadow of the sea. It's said to be a massive, ancient predator that only appears when the balance of the ocean is disrupted. According to the stories, it hunts not just for food, but to restore the natural order of the sea. I never believed in legends, Luis, but sometimes the ocean surprises even the most seasoned scientists." The idea of an ancient predator seemed far-fetched to Luis, but something about the way Anna spoke sent chills down his spine. She wasn't the type to indulge in superstitions, yet there was a haunted look in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. "Do you think the shark that attacked you was this creature?" Luis asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Anna shook her head slowly. "I don't know. I don't believe in mythical creatures, but what happened to me felt different. That shark was behaving in ways I've never seen before. It wasn't just hunting. It was reacting to something. I just don't know what." That night, Luis lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with questions. Could it be true? Could the shark attack have been part of something larger, something beyond the natural order they understood? As far-fetched as it sounded, the more Luis thought about it, the more plausible it seemed. He had felt something strange that day in the water, an almost unnatural presence, as if the shark had been driven by something other than hunger. Over the next few days, Luis became obsessed with uncovering the truth. He began researching everything he could about shark behavior, poring over marine biology books and online articles, searching for any clue that might explain the erratic behavior Anna had observed. He even started talking to the local fishermen, trying to find out if anyone else had noticed anything unusual. It was during one of these conversations that Luis heard something that made his blood run cold. An elderly fisherman named Joao, who had been working the waters around Santa Esperanca for over 50 years, pulled him aside one afternoon. "I heard about your mother's attack," Joao said, his weathered face serious. "You're looking for answers, aren't you?" Luis nodded, unsure where this was going. Joao leaned in closer, his voice lowering to a whisper. "I've seen it. A Sombra du March. It's real, boy. And it's been coming closer to shore these past few years. Your mother's attack wasn't the first, and it won't be the last. Something's changed in these waters. The ocean is out of balance, and that creature is here to fix it." Luis felt a chill run down his spine. He wanted to dismiss Joao's words as the ramblings of an old man, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more truth to the story than he wanted to believe. As Luis walked away from the conversation, his mind reeled. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was one of fear and uncertainty. If Joao was right, if a Sombra du Mar was real and growing bolder, then the shark attack on Anna wasn't just a random event. It was a warning, and Luis knew that whatever was happening in the waters of Santa Esperanca was far from over. The sun was setting over Santa Esperanca, casting a golden glow on the tranquil waters of the cove where Luis and Anna had once shared so many peaceful moments. But for Luis, now 14, the ocean no longer felt like the safe haven it once was. It had become a constant reminder of that terrifying day when he had faced death and saved his mother from the jaws of a great white shark. Though Anna had survived the attack, Both of their lives had changed forever. In the months following the incident, Anna had struggled with her recovery, physically and emotionally. Her once strong and confident demeanor had faded, replaced by a deep sense of vulnerability. Her leg, permanently scarred from the shark bite, limited her mobility, and she often required assistance. But it wasn't just her body that had been affected. Anna had developed a profound fear of the ocean, the very thing she had once loved and dedicated her life to studying. For Luis, the burden of his mother's trauma weighed heavily on him. He had been hailed as a local hero, but the praise felt hollow. No matter how many people applauded his bravery, Luis couldn't shake the feeling that he had somehow failed. The guilt gnawed at him. He couldn't save his mother from the lasting emotional scars, nor could he return to the carefree days they once enjoyed by the sea. As the months passed, Luis became distant, isolating himself from his friends and the town's admiration. The ocean, once a place of refuge and excitement, now filled him with dread. He had avoided returning to the cove where the attack had happened, afraid of the memories it would stir. But something inside him told him that he couldn't run from the past forever. One evening, as Luis sat on the porch of their small beach house, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Anna joined him. She was using a cane now, the limp in her step a constant reminder of their ordeal. But her face, though tired, held a new kind of strength. "Luis," Anna said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything they had been through, "I know you've been struggling. I have too. But we can't let that day control us. We can't let fear keep us from living." Luis remained silent, his eyes fixed on the ocean. He wanted to believe her, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shark's shadow looming beneath the water, felt the cold rush of fear that had gripped him when he thought he might lose her. "I'm not asking you to forget," Anna continued, sitting down beside him, "but we need to face it together." Luis turned to look at his mother. Despite her physical limitations, Anna's spirit was still strong. She had spent her entire life teaching him about the beauty and complexity of the ocean, and she wasn't ready to abandon it, no matter how deeply her fear ran. And Luis realized then that he wasn't ready to abandon it either. The ocean was a part of them, of their bond, and it always would be. The following week, Anna made a decision that would change everything. She had been in touch with an old colleague, Dr. Harrison, a renowned marine biologist who specialized in shark behavior. Dr. Harrison was planning an expedition to track and study the great white shark population along the coast, including the very shark that had attacked Anna. He believed that understanding the behavior of these creatures could prevent future incidents and help dispel the fear that surrounded them. Anna saw the expedition as a chance for closure, not just for herself, but for Luis as well. She proposed that they join Dr. Harrison on the expedition. It was a radical idea, one that terrified Luis at first. The thought of returning to the scene of the attack, of facing the same predator that had almost taken his mother's life, was overwhelming. But Anna was determined, and Luis couldn't deny the flicker of curiosity that stirred within him. As the day of the expedition approached, Luis found himself torn between fear and the desire to confront his past. The closer they got to the cove, the more vivid his memories became. The attack played on a loop in his mind. His mother's scream, the sight of the shark's gaping jaws, the frantic swim to safety. But there was something else too, something he couldn't quite shake. A sense of unfinished business. When they finally arrived at the cove with Dr. Harrison's team, Luis felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The water was calm, just as it had been on the day of the attack, but now it felt different, charged with an unseen tension. As they prepared the equipment, Dr. Harrison briefed them on the plan. They would be using drones and tracking devices to monitor the sharks in the area, gathering data on their migratory patterns and behavior. For Luis, the thought of coming face to face with the same shark that had attacked Anna was almost too much to bear. But as they set off on the boat, something shifted inside him. He wasn't the same boy he had been a year ago. He had survived the impossible, and now he had the chance to understand the creature that had nearly destroyed his family. As the boat cruised over the waters of the cove, Luis kept his eyes on the horizon, waiting for the telltale shadow of the great white. The ocean felt alive beneath them, teeming with secrets that he had once been so eager to uncover. Now, those secrets felt more personal, like pieces of a puzzle that he needed to solve to move forward. Then, in the distance, Luis saw it, a dark, hulking shape moving just below the surface. His heart raced, but he didn't look away. This time, he wouldn't run. Anna, once calm and patient, began experiencing strange outbursts. Her senses seemed heightened, her behavior more erratic. Luis couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He confided in Sullivan, who seemed evasive, brushing off Luis' concerns. But the truth was lurking just beneath the surface. Late one night, Luis overheard a conversation between Sullivan and one of the doctors. What he heard chilled him to the bone. The shark that had attacked Anna. It wasn't just any shark. It had been part of an illegal experiment, a genetically modified predator designed to be more aggressive, more dangerous. The serum, derived from this altered shark, was affecting Anna in ways no one had anticipated. Desperate to uncover the full truth, Luis confronted Sullivan. "What did you do to my mother?" he demanded. Sullivan hesitated, then finally admitted the horrifying truth. The experiment had gone wrong, and Anna wasn't just recovering. She was changing. The serum had altered her biology, merging human and shark DNA in ways that were unpredictable and dangerous. Luis was devastated. The treatment that had saved Anna was now turning her into something else, something inhuman. In a final twist, Luis realized that the shark attack had never been an accident. The shark had been released into the wild as part of the experiment, and Anna had been an unintended victim. Sullivan had been covering up the truth all along, using Luis' bravery as a way to manipulate him into saving his own dangerous research. As the full weight of the revelation hit, Luis knew he had one final choice to make: save his mother from the transformation or expose the truth to the world, no matter the cost.